Hey, it's Daishion Miller, and we're here with our KUDEN radio podcast weekly gathering, right? So today is, what is today? Monday, February 21st of 2022, for those of you who are keeping track. And yeah, so if you saw the little, I don't know, billboard slide, whatever I've been posting all day, then you know what the theme is about, kind of, right? Because I only have so many words to use. But let's start this off before we, run the titles and all that kind of stuff. Something that I've been thinking about a lot lately that I think we all could use quite a bit of reminding about, right? Because there's this trap that we can all kind of fall into. And anyway, so you might have heard this before. I'm going to adjust my screen right here. Right. So anyway, so again, if you're listening on Apple, what the hell are they? They used to be Apple Tunes, Apple Podcasts, and Stitcher, and all that. You have no idea what I just did. But anyway, but we again, a lot of this, it requires some avoidance of traps, right? If we're really going to progress. So here's the thing, right? Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, right? Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, and success is engineered. Regardless of whether we're talking about martial arts, our life, or whatever, right? Success is engineered. It's not luck, right? And I know it's easy to fall into some of these traps and believe that the opposite is true, but it's not, right? So let's go ahead and kick this off, and I'll talk to everybody again in just a minute.
So, the big question is this: how are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to KUDEN Radio, real training for real people in a real world.
And that's true. Anyway, all right, so James is in the background monitoring all this stuff. I know for most of you who are just like listening in the future, this thing started when it started and whatever. But for those who are waiting for it to get started, we got started a couple minutes late because there was some system glitches and all that. But James, am I coming through okay? Everything's good. We're all good. Excellent. All right. So let's go back to what I mentioned before this whole thing kicked off, right? Absence of evidence, right? Do we know what that means, right? Absence of evidence, right? Something that was really big when I was in law enforcement, right? Somebody could say that a crime was committed or whatever, but there's nothing that even points to that, right? There's an absence of evidence, right? Or we could, people could know. I'm making air quotes for those that are just on the audio stuff, right? They could know that somebody's just crooked or bad, or they did something wrong, or they're going to, or whatever, right? The problem is that if there's no evidence, right, then it's really hard to prove that that's true, right? And that's where things like religion or spirituality or philosophy or faith or trust or whatever comes in, right? Because the absence of evidence, right, is not evidence of absence, right? And so that's the other side, right? Evidence of absence. What does that mean, right? Well, where we run into this is folks have a hard time. I know I did, right? I mean, I didn't come to this like I wasn't born, right, with my mom standing up, holding on to a tree, and my first 7 steps, there was a lotus petal or a lotus flower growing up. It's actually the story, the Buddha's origin story for anybody that knows it. It doesn't matter, right? But people like to believe, right, that their teacher somehow, or these other people that are successful, somehow have this leg up on the world, or they're lucky, or they were whatever, right? What are some of these terms, right? They were born with a silver spoon in their mouth, or whatever, right? But what's really going on is this friggin' trap, right? that because I can't see it, right? And we'll talk about a couple of different ways that this can show up. That because I can't see something, or I can't recognize the potential now, or there's like knowledge I don't have, or whatever, right? That somehow that's evidence that I can't do it, right? That's all evidence. It's all proof, right? That who knows what, right? The friggin' world's out to get me. Everybody else, is somehow screwing the system or cheating or whatever. So that's how they're getting theirs, or whatever, right? Everything from my wife won't let me to, I've had injuries and I've been trying to do this for 30 years and whatever, right? Name a whole slew of freaking reasons that people give as the evidence for why whatever they want, money, time, whatever, right? Why that's absent in their life, right? But that's not true, right? The absence of evidence, right? Evidence of absence. These go together in this little thing, right? So what we're looking at here is okay, we can't see it, right? So we have no evidence. We have no facts or justifying factors or whatever that prove, right, that I can do it, right? But there's a problem, right? There's this gap, and this is going to come up again, but there's this gap, right? If I truly can't do this, right? If all of these things that I believe are true, right? This so-called absence of evidence, right? There's nothing to show me that I can actually do this in my world, in my life, right? Why the hell do I have this burning desire, this dream, this drive, whatever you want to call it, to do this thing, to get this thing, to get into a better place, right? I mean, is this some ginormous fucking cosmic joke that, okay, so I was born with all these desires or developed them or whatever, but they're never going to be realized for me because I'm just stuck, right? It's just never going to happen, right? I mean, what kind of brutal kind of God or universe or whatever could there be, right? And why would there be descriptions of heaven or hell if, I don't know about you, but to me, having those dreams and desires and goals and burning passions and all that, but absolutely being incapable of realizing them, I can't imagine hell being worse than that. I can't. Okay. And that's coming from somebody that had all these same beliefs, right? So again, before you think that I'm like on some pedestal doing some kind of sermon or preaching about something that you need to do and whatever, but I can't possibly understand. All this is coming from a level of understanding. All of this is coming from loving lessons from teachers. Now, sometimes those loving lessons were like a sit down, nurturing conversation. And sometimes they were a freaking tip of the boot love kind of thing. If you're going to do this, you move your ass kind of thing, right? All that non-nice stuff that nobody wants to hear, right? But, right, we've got this potential for more, right? More than you've been taught, right? More than you've been told, more than you've maybe, like me, had beaten into you or beaten out of you, right? Comply. The people that were doing the beating, right? They never accomplished their dreams and goals. So how dare you, right? And because they're in a position of authority or size or strength or power or whatever, they're going to get conformity one way or the other. Okay. Or how about a belief because you're so focused on your current condition or your current state that you actually believe that that's a forever thing and not a temporary condition, right? That's what this statement means. This absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, okay? And so I've got a whole bunch of notes here because there was so much that was just like popping around in my head for this episode that I want to make sure that we get this, right? There's this trap, right? But we also have to understand, and I know a couple of episodes ago and some of my lessons with my inner circle students during our personal development week, right? Our curriculum is kind of broken down into each week is a different part of the training, right? So week one is personal development, could be history, could be knowledge, it could be Seishin Teki, right? Personal clarity, whatever, right? Week two is, what is that? Skills? No, that's strategy and tactics week, right? So we're looking at how to apply the techniques or how to set them up so that application is much, much easier. Those kind of things, right? It's strategic thinking, it's tactical application. It's controlling the situation before the bullets ever start flying or the fists start flying or whatever. It's making your attacker believe that they have control when they've lost it already, but they don't know it yet, right? Those kind of things, right? And then week three is skills and techniques, right? And that's where we'll focus in on a skill or three or a given technique or whatever, and really do a deep dive into what's really going on and not what it looks like is going on, right? Because remember, this is ninjutsu. One of the things I was taught a long, long time ago was, this is one of those things that was pounded into me, right? If you're really doing ninjutsu, then nothing is ever what it looks like. And if it is what it looks like, then one, not only is it not ninjutsu, but he knows what you're doing. He's probably experienced it before. He probably has counters to it. And so, you've got a problem, right? You're going to end up fighting like everybody else, right? So, and then what's week four? Week four is weapons week. So, but anyway, right? I've covered this thing either a couple of episodes ago or whatever, where we have to be careful how we let conditioning determine our future, okay? Because our perception of reality is based on what we have experienced, and if left unchecked, it will determine what we will experience, right? It's just going to be like a merry-go-round, right? In Mikyo, we call it samsara, right? Samsara is normally seen of as, by a lot of people as like the hell of Buddhism or whatever, but well, I guess it could be perceived that way, right? But the word samsara means to go around very much, right? In the States, I don't know about Canada or Australia or the UK or whatever, but we say same shit, different day. We say what goes around comes around. We say all these little things that really mean the same thing, right? It's the same shit over and over and over and over again, right? But what we don't get is that we're driving, right? I mean, ultimately, it's up to us as to what we believe or whatever, okay? So anyway, right? So this really leads to, if we're going to fix this, right? If we're going to get to the handle on this, and we're going to really start making changes, right? Again, these are things that my teachers taught me that they're not. If you trained with me on a regular basis, you would hear this very often, right? It could be physical training drills, it could be KUDEN lessons like this, whatever. But you'll hear me say things like, this is not a self-defense technique, right? In and of itself, but it has absolutely everything to do with self-defense. Okay. And we have to handle these, right? Because there's far too many people, in my opinion, far too many people contacting me really wanting to do things, right? That's the lead in on their email, or the lead in on their discussion on a live kind of thing or whatever. But then it very, very quickly shifts to, they may not use these words. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But the gist goes to this, right? I really want to do this. I've always wanted to do this. I need to get back to it, whatever, but I can't. And here are all the reasons why I can't, right? See, my ears, now my mouth used to use the same logic, right? But I got the lessons and I had to work the lessons. But what my ears hear now probably is the same thing that my teachers used to hear, right? And I don't mean like wah, 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 not that, right? What I'm hearing is your plan, right? For making the change, okay? Because if you've identified all the things that are getting in your way, then if I systematically eliminate those things or change those things or whatever, right? Then the success that I'm looking for should happen by default. Or even if the success is, now I can start training, right? The problem can be one of two things, and sometimes it's both. One, we are so conditioned. Well, three things. We're so conditioned to believing that this is it, that nothing that anybody tells me is going to work, right? To get me to see something different. Okay. Two, I could be so conditioned to believe that this is true that it becomes absolutely freaking terrifying to do something different, because part of that conditioning, whether it was self-induced or somebody else taught me, was that I'm gonna get some kind of punishment or hell because I break from the status quo, right? I'm going to crash and burn. I'm going to fail miserably. I'm going to whatever, right? Or the third condition, or the third thing, is that I won't even try. I mean, all of these things are about the not trying, right? But I could be so conditioned to the level of comfort that I have, right? That I'm, this is safe, right? So it's just, this is comfortable, right? I don't have an imperative need, right? This isn't 13th century Japan where there's a risk of government forces invading our mountain and killing every man, woman, and child in the village or in the villages, right? There's no imperative need to get this stuff because, well, it's really kind of a nicety. It's not a necessity, right? And I said this before, right? Comfort is the poison of success, right? And it doesn't matter if it's comfortable statements or it's comfortable conditions, right? Okay. Anyway, so one of the things I got thinking about was something that one of my mentors uses this, but it's in a different context, right? But I got to thinking about this stuff, and it's if you really get into this stuff, it's going to require a lot of thinking. It's going to require more effort and energy and passion and drive and resources than you could even imagine. But if it's worth doing, anyway. So the thing I got thinking about was what I'm going to call generational stupidity. Okay, generational stupidity. And this could be in the martial arts. This could be in school, right? The academic world. This could be in our families, right? And what I mean by generational stupidity is somebody came up with some kind of freaking idea that this is the limit, right? This is as far as we can go. This is the reality. This is the way it is. And then that just keeps getting passed down, right? From mentor, parent, teacher, whatever, to the next group. They take it as some kind of sacrosanct gospel kind of thing. And then that gets passed on, and that gets passed on, and that gets passed on. And then, right, it just becomes truth, right? Well, it's what everybody does. And as a part of that generational stupidity, right, what human beings tend to do is gather together in groups of people that have similar ideologies, right? We move into neighborhoods that we feel comfortable in, right? We wouldn't, if we're worried about the possessions we have or whatever, we might not move into certain neighborhoods because of the crime rate, but also we might not move into certain neighborhoods because, these people are all on a higher level of success. They've got, based on whatever definition we're using, nicer cars, nicer houses, nicer clothes, whatever, right? And so either way, it's going to make us feel uncomfortable, right? So we don't, right? So we gravitate toward neighborhoods. We gravitate toward jobs. We gravitate toward businesses that allow me to surround myself with people that are very similar, or at least a department and job that I'm going to get into that remind me of me, right? That I'm going to feel comfortable with because we're all the same, right? Now that just piles extra shit on top of the generational stupidity, because now what you have is a bunch of people running around with an ideology that's in common, but the energy is just it's more involved because the generational stupidity is coming from a lot of paths, right? A lot of lines, right? One of the things that I'm kind of reminded of is I've had students that were in other martial arts that did sport competition, that kind of thing, right? They get involved in what we're doing, and they very quickly realize that, oh man, there's a lot of stuff that we're doing that I can't do in the ring. There's rules against that, right? You can't stick your thumb in somebody's eye. You can't grab a groin. You can't, whatever, right? But what ends up happening is down the line, the itch comes back in because they really enjoyed that. And, there's this idea, right? Can I go? Yeah, we as a school don't do that, but absolutely. You can go, you can name the school, have a good time, right? And then they come back very, very disappointed because when they did it originally, they were so caught up in their style, and it was everybody coming in these different styles, right? Whatever, name names. I'm not going to throw any out because I don't want to push any buttons and have somebody have a spasm or something, right? But what they couldn't see then that they could see now was everybody's representing a style, but because of the way the things are organized and they're set up, right? And just the way it's done, right? There now becomes this common mindset that you see very little of the style from different people, regardless of the art they came from. And when they're out in the ring, they all pretty much look like they're doing the same thing, but they're trying to do it faster, or they're trying to do it harder, or they're trying to do it trickier. But what you really don't see is the secrets that those individual styles were supposed to bring to the table. Okay? And often the reason for that is the rule sets kind of strip away a lot of things that were guarded secrets, right? But there's that, right? And there's all these kind of things, right? There's things that you might even have things in your own family. I remember once, it was a long time ago, but this was in a different age, right? When the moms and the aunts and the grandmas and all that taught the girls that were coming up, right, how to cook and that kind of stuff. And that's what they did, during family get-togethers, and they handled all that stuff. And the guys did all the heavy lifting and putting all the picnic tables in place and hanging stuff and, whipping out the grills and whatever, right? But I remember there was this discussion because I was, I like to cook from a very, very early age. So I kind of weaseled myself in there, took some jibes from the other guys in the family because, that's women's work. Really, I got my wife because one of our early dates, I cooked for her, and then we've had cooking contests because we both think we're the better cook. But anyway, right? So there was this family gathering, and so I'm watching them make this roast. Right, they were making this roast, and I mean they would get these large roast. Right, this is what you get. You get this roast. It comes a certain size, right? And then what they were doing was they were like lopping off like 20-30% of the roast and wrapping it up and putting it away for some later meal or something, right? And then they were putting it in this pan. Pan had plenty of room, right? But they're, seasoned it, did all this kind of stuff, right? Put it in the oven. And I'm like, okay, all right, so you do this, right? And for a while, right, that just kind of stuck, right? This recipe was passed down from like a grandmother or something, right? And so I think it was like my grandmother's grandmother. So it's going okay, right? And but then there's this meal that we're preparing for, right? And I'm looking at this thing like, why are we saving this other meat? I mean, we're okay for what are you going to make it? What are we going to make with it later in the week? Well, I don't know yet, but it's part of the recipe. This is what we do. We cut off this end and we wrap it up and we put it away. And so I'm confused now, right? Because something sparked in my head, like, why are we doing that, right? And all I kept getting back was, well, this is part of the recipe. This is just how it's done. This is, whatever, right? And so, like, I wouldn't let it go. And I'm really irritating people, right? Why are you doing this? I mean, why? I mean, we got a lot of people, right? You bought 3 roasts. You're going to lop off 20 or 30% of each of these roasts, wrap it up and put it away. That's extra food that could be feeding the folks. Maybe we could have bought 2 roasts or whatever, right? And I finally follow it back. So I get to I ask my mom and my aunts and stuff, and I keep getting this answer. And then I go to my grandmother. And finally, like I asked my grandmother, and she starts thinking about it. She says, that's what your grandmother, or what my mother used to always do, right? And she said, now that I think about it, I think she did that because she didn't have a pan big enough for a full-size roast. So, she had to cut it, right? And then that was saved, right? Because, they came out of the Depression era, not a whole lot of money, right? So they typically only did this for like Sunday meals. And even when I was young and growing up, right, till I moved off and had my own family, the Sunday meal was like the big meal for the week. And like you made a lot of food so that there was leftovers, right? And this came from a poverty mindset way back, even though, in the mid 70s, my dad was making $13 to $15 an hour, which was a god awful amount, because the minimum wage was $2.30 an hour or something like that, right? Making a lot of money. Of course, as a negative role model, he also showed me how you can piss a lot of money away too by just doing a bunch of shit and not being responsible, not focusing on the future. Anyway, that's a different class. So anyway, what it really came down to was the recipe was written down based on grandmother, great grandmother, whatever, the person who started it, not having a pan big enough. So that was written into the recipe. Cut this much off, place in pan, whatever, right? Except that my grandmother and my mom and aunt had bigger pans, right? So see, now I'm not saying that great grandma was stupid or anything like that. She was working what was going on. But what ends up happening is we end up having this blind faith in the people that told us how to do something, right? How specific was that lesson? Or did we make assumptions about what they were saying, right? Did we clarify, or did we just guess, right? Or is there something else going on, right? So here's a question for everybody, right? I mean, we're on a Need to or a martial arts self-defense podcast, right? One, have you ever heard anybody in your family knock what you're doing, right? Why do you have to be doing that, right? I mean, is this, what I heard was, I'm just going to put food on the table, right? Is this going to feed your family, right? What's this going to do for you, right? The answer is yes. I told my stepfather that before he died. Yeah, puts food on the table. Yeah, protects my family, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, you bet, right? Protects a lot of other people too. But I got a bunch of these things, right? There was even some verbal attacks to try to get me to not do things, right? So I don't know if you can relate to any of this stuff. If you can, then maybe it makes more sense, right? But I also remember, the same thing growing up. I suddenly became aware of religion. It was probably early junior high school, maybe like, I don't know, 6th grade, 7th grade, something like that. You guys might call it middle school now because you're not old like me. But I became aware of, I'm walking home from school and I'm passing a Baptist church, I'm passing a Lutheran church, I'm passing a Catholic church, I'm passing a Jewish synagogue, I'm, whatever, right? I'm passing all these things. And so, I go home and in my best ability, right? I mean, is there a church that we're associated with, or, why are all these different ones? And what I hear is, we're Methodist. Okay. What does that mean? Right. Well, that's what our family does. That's our belief system. I learned a bunch of other crap later, but either way, I was left with the assumption that like we have a certain color blood because that's just part of the genetic makeup, right? I had no idea that people could choose. I was just taught that this is what we do, right? And then there were all these little, dogmatic rules and stuff like that came along with it. But if you think about any area of your life, unless you branched out and got away from whatever the family was doing, and you're literally doing your own thing, and then how much of that really is your own thing, right? How much of that is actually still going on? How much of that is still conditioning what you think you're capable of, right? How far you think you can go, right? What is it that is what we do that you've taken as a limitation on me, right? And again, not just families, right? Schools, martial arts, right? We don't, somebody does something or does a little move in class or whatever. I've heard this, right? Doing a little move, no, not with my teachers, but doing something, right? And somebody leans over and goes, "We don't do it that way. Right? That's not our style, right? That's wrong." Wait, what? So it doesn't work? Well, yeah, it works, but that's what those guys over there do. That's not our style, right? If you're gonna do this, then you got to conform to this kind of thing. Okay. Same thing in school, right? Anybody ever think to ask, especially if you live in the States, right? Why we only go to school 9 months out of the year and we have the summer off? It's not about a big vacation. It goes back to our agrarian roots when we were a farming country, right? The family needed the kids at home during the summer months for handling the farm all the way to harvest. And then after the harvest was done, now you can go get educated during the cold months and all that. So that because, there's nothing to do around the farm. I mean, there's chores, feed the animals and all that kind of stuff, but it's not the same as having to plant, tend, harvest, take to market, that kind of stuff. It's very, very different, right? So why? Same thing with having counties. In Louisiana, you would say parishes, right? But that's a throwback to when people were all spread out, right? So you have a county that governs all these little villages and burgs and all that. But these things freaking grew big, right? And here we still have counties. Why do we still have counties, right? I mean, towns almost, unless you're in farming country, they don't damn near butt up against each other, right? They're buying each other out, right? So they can get a bigger share of the tax base and those kind of things, right? So until you really look into it, you get trapped by this, that because it's the way it's done, right? You don't question it. It's just the way it's done, right? But either way, there's this idea, right, that we have to be careful because if that's the way it's always been done, then perhaps therein lies our evidence for absence, right? That, everything I see, right, is proof that I can't do it. But if I'm willing to look and not just assume because of the other stupidity that I got, which had to do with, well, those rich people over there have always been rich. They were born with a silver spoon in their mouth, and they're out to screw the little guy. Right? If I actually start looking and realize they're first generation wealthy, that guy is, put himself through school. He's the first one in his family to graduate, and that's why he's a lawyer. He doesn't come from a family of lawyers. Right? I know an eye doctor. She was a member of my school. I think she was an eye doctor, and her husband is a lawyer. Right? But she was raised in a family of coal miners. They didn't have college educations, right? So, but to look at somebody and make assumptions, because that's what you were taught to do, right? Doctors, lawyers, whatever, they come from a different class in life, right? With no clue that they grew up out of, right? But if we're willing to look and we're willing to see that, then we can see that, oh shit, the absence of evidence in my life, right, because it's been conditioned, is not evidence of absence, period, right? These other people grew up just like me or worse, and they made it. Interesting, right? and some of you already know this story, right? I was beaten physically, emotionally, and I don't mean like I was a spanked child and I have resentment and I am using the whole drama king kind of thing to make it sound like it was worse than it was. No, I mean the man landed punches wherever he could reach, right? I remember one time, and I may have mentioned this before, but I remember one time we were all sitting watching TV in the living room, right? And he had complete control over, whether we could go out and play, whether we could do whatever, right? And he snapped awake from a nap on the couch. I mean, that man practically slept his life away, but he snapped awake. He screamed my sister's name, picked up a shoe and threw it across the living room, hit her right in the face, right? Now, he panicked and apologized profusely, except that this individual, right, dreamt violence. Okay. Scary shit, right? So here I am, right? When I encountered these teachings, right? Got my first books, looking at that martial arts magazines and all that, right? That's the kind of world I grew out of, right? Remember, I became a cop to combat this stuff because that's what I thought I had available to me, right? I was doing other martial arts, right? And trying to conform to things regardless of whether or not they looked like they actually matched defending against things that would actually happen on the street or the kind of violence that I had witnessed and been, the target of and all that kind of stuff, right? But it wasn't until I realized that, wow, several of my teachers, similar backgrounds. Hatsumi Sensei, right? Past generation grandmaster. I know that's going to ruffle a lot of feathers, right? Oh, he's the grandmaster. No, he's passed the torch, guys. So does that mean I don't respect it? No, of course not, right? But let's call it what it is, right? He's now the 34th generation of, or 19th or 17th or 28th or whatever, right? And now there's 35, right? So anyway, I come to find out that, his family had money, but his dad was a raging alcoholic. He was great when he wasn't drinking, but most nights, guy would stumble in the house, drunk off his ass, and be absolutely violent. He would go into the bedroom and beat his mom, right? Beat Hatsumi Sensei's mom. And so that's where he learned a lot of his tactics with like distraction and getting this guy to wear down energy-wise until he just like fell asleep, right? You can cover him up, right? Not doing anything to kind of trigger those little moments and things like that. How to be evasive, how to be, how to use like what we come to find out are skills within the Ninja no Uge and stuff like that, right? So I come to find out that, wow, this guy that I idolize, wow, no shit. And he rose above it. Huh. Look at that. Maybe, right? But I still ran into a lot of issues, right? And it took for teachers to look at me and go, look, you have a choice. Okay. Here's 3 choices. Okay. Accept whatever situations and conditions are going on, right? And shift your brain so that you're okay with it so you can get on with things and produce results, right? Or accept the fact that you've decided to limit yourself. And so there's a lot of things you're not going to be able to do because you won't make the changes that are necessary. Or you walk away from it, you get away from it, right? Or you have the tough conversations with those other people that might be involved so that the changes that need to happen will happen, right? But either way, stop bitching about it. Stop complaining about it. Stop thinking about yourself in the context of a victim, right? Because you're doing nothing more than reminding yourself and the universe that, yep, absolutely, you're a victim, right? So these are the hard lessons that I had to get. And then I had to be mindful of my thoughts. I had to be mindful of my speech and how I describe things. I had to catch myself using old word patterns that spoke of victimhood and and the inability to, and all these reasons why. And it took a while to get, in Mikyo, we call it a turning in the seat of consciousness. So my brain became tuned to finding solutions rather than focusing on shit, right? So anyway, right? So again, there's this conflict between what we've been conditioned to, right? Well, I'm not going to be nice about it because that's depersonalizing things, right? What you've been conditioned, right, to believing, to whatever, right, to see, to think, to do about what's possible for you or for your clan or whatever, right? And what's really so, right? What's really true. And again, we have to find this gap, right? We have to. There's this gap between what you've been taught and this burning desire, right, for mastery. So for some of us, it's just a freaking train, right? To have a better job, to get, so, I mean, I know the common thing in today's world, which is not a warrior way to do things, right? The common thing today is, I don't believe that I have the potential to do anything else. I believe that I am downtrodden. I believe that the man is holding me back. I believe that I've been forced into a state of victimhood, slavery, whatever. And so what I have to do is rise up with all the other victims and bully the world into giving us more, instead of figuring out how to unleash my potential so that I can move into a different place where I can naturally produce more. There's this huge gap, right? And it's become fashionable, right? How many points can I get for what different categories of victimhood that I can fall into, right? I mean, this just takes the welfare state and just blows it out into a whole cultural ideology. And I know that's going to make me the target of a bunch of people, but you know what? I was raised in a fucking welfare family with this kind of mentality. So don't tell me that I don't understand. I understand both sides. Maybe the problem for those who would tell me that I don't understand is that I do understand and you don't want to hear it. Okay. No, I'm not talking about you guys. I'm just, you is in a general context, because everybody listening in on the podcast is enlightened, right? So you probably don't need this lesson anyway. That's why James and I are watching people jumping on the podcast, sticking it out for 30 seconds to 5 minutes, and then jumping right back off again, right? Because I'm either boring them or it's not. I'm not talking about martial arts techniques and all that, but I am, right? We could be battling a physical attacker coming at us, or we could be battling stupidity and people trying to like play head games with us and all that. Or we could be battling what one of my teachers used to call the dragons of ignorance and misdirected desire. Okay. I mean, anyway, so I was introduced to, we were all introduced to these different lessons, right? What people tend to focus on is the how-to, the steps, right? The things for fighting, right? Here are all these fighting skills. The problem is that most of these people are fucking terrified, right? That they want to feel powerful, but they don't want to do all the hard work that actually makes somebody powerful, right? Because God forbid you become one of them, right? Because, powerful people, they screw you over, they're douches, they're whatever, right? All these names we have for people that, we resent because they have more than we have or whatever, right? So here's what I want you to think about, right? We have these, and I've talked about these things before, right? We have these three aspects of a ninja, right? You have the Miwo Shinobu, the Kokoro Shinobu, Shikiwo Shinobu, right? Miwo Shinobu, the body capable of enduring. Kokoro Shinobu, the mind capable of enduring, right? And the Shikiwo Shinobu, the perception, right? This self-check kind of thing, right? To keep ego in check, that reconciles what's going on the inside, what's going on the outside, right? To make sure that we recognize universal truth and we're reflecting that, right? We're living to natural laws, those kind of things, right? What I want you to think about is not just the fact that we have things to train with in each of these areas. what I want you to think about is how, or the reality is that these are areas that, yes, it's training, but these three areas to develop the body capable, the mind capable, the spirit, right, actually is the training to prepare us to be able to handle all the really hard shit we're going to face as we move toward whatever that goal is that we're going to, whether it's martial arts mastery or who knows, wealth building, getting that degree, right? And the rest of the family's jumping on us because we think we're all that, a bag of fucking chips. But, you know, we're trying to be highfalutin and, oh, look who's got the money because they just bought a new car and whatever, right? People do all kinds of bullshit to knock you down. But if that's what's going to stop you, then I have to question how much you really wanted it, right? But that's not exactly true either, right? Because if we don't have the tools to handle it, then we're going to have a hard time, right? We may need physical skills because somebody could be so bothered by our potential strength. My abusive stepfather, 6th grade dropout, right? Was raised in a poor family, whatever. Didn't have a lot of aptitude there anyway, but he was willing to beat me to keep me in place so that, and I mean, and it wasn't just fists, right? It was name calling and stuff. I mean, stupid and ignorant, all these kind of things that would demean me, break my self-esteem, my sense of self-confidence and all that stuff to get me to believe that so that I wasn't a threat, so that I couldn't produce more. I wouldn't know more. I couldn't do more, whatever. Do you get this? Right? So think of it in the context of bullying, right? Some bullies are just willing to attack you physically, right? Give me your damn lunch money. I'm going to beat the shit out of you, right? Okay. Other ones, maybe they're not physically capable of that, and more they're worried about getting punched in the face themselves, right? So maybe that's not them. Maybe they're really smart, right? So what they do is play all kinds of word games, throw puzzles at you, all kinds of, psychological warfare kind of things, right? To convince you that you're dumber than them or they're smarter. Either way, both these people are trying to position themselves into a superior position, right? You got the other kind of bully that, uses things like friendship and love and all that. It's a whole different type of psychological warfare, right? One of the terms for it in today's modern world is gaslighting, right? Doing things to make you think that you're freaking nuts, that you're the one that's insane, right? And what they're doing is trying to break you down so they can take your shit, right? You see what I just covered? Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, life, relationship kind of thing, right? So these three aspects of a ninja, somebody who can endure, right? It's about enduring challenges, right? I mean, if you're just going to sit on your ass and complain that you can't, or you're comfortable, and so, this other stuff is really tough, and I don't know, can I just buy a black belt? Whatever, right? If you're going to do that, you don't need these aspects, right? If you're just waiting for Aunt Minnie to die and will you $1 million, well, you don't need these things, right? You don't need mental resilience. You don't need physical resilience, right? You just, do what you do, right? So, but they're about, these three areas are about reconditioning yourself, rebuilding yourself, recreating yourself, right? To handle the challenges that prevent success, that prevent mastery, that prevent wisdom, enlightenment, whatever the goal is, right? You're going to need to be able to weather the storm, right? I mean, why else would it be called ninjutsu, right? Jutsu, skills, art, science, nin, perseverance, endurance. Why the hell would it be called? Why not just call it, taijutsu and just, 90% do? Because the rest of the shit's too difficult, right? Or it's seen as, that's not what we do in today's world and stuff. It's just, you just freaking took your focus on this thing that's ginormous and brought it down to some really small aspect that is the easiest part. You show up in a room with a bunch of other people, you put on special clothes, You go through some prearranged dance moves, whether they're historical or your teacher made it up for you to do it, right? You feel all great about yourself, but it's not being pressure tested and probably never will. But we can walk around with this sense of confidence with our big fucking ego bone, right? Our sternum puffed out at the world, like we're jack shit and you know, whatever, right? No, the stuff is designed. There's a whole other body of knowledge and training to prepare us to be able to weather the frickin' storm, to make these changes, right? To gain the kind of, to attain the goal, the dream, the vision, whatever it is you have in your freaking head, whatever's driving you, whatever's causing a bunch of you to send me freaking emails. You at least took that step, which is awesome, right? But then you're going to turn around and just shoot yourself in the face, right? That'd be like, there's a good analogy, right? I'm gonna buy a weapon to protect myself against all the bad guys, but when the bad guys show up, and that's what I trained for, that's what I have the tools for and all that. But when they show up, I'm going to turn the gun on myself because, you know, I'm going to lose anyway. What kind of shit is that, right? Oh, and for those of you who keep showing up for this thing, waiting for me to talk about martial arts techniques, that's not what KUDEN is about. Not just the podcast. It's not what the term points to. Teacher-student transmission of stuff that's grander than these little freaking models, right? Oh, I'll get to one technique today, okay? Just so everybody's happy, all right? So what else do I have here? Okay, so this is what I was taught, right? Everybody wants to know what were you taught way back in the day, right? Well, this is what I was taught, right? I was taught to stop fucking pissing and moaning and whining and maybe even swearing too, but either way, right? That's contextual. And sometimes you need to be punched in the face to move, right? This was not me, okay? The person I'm talking to, whether it's you or somebody else, whatever, the person I'm talking about right now was the old me. Abso-freaking-lutely was the old me. I mean, think about if you know any of this, if you remember any of the stories that I've passed on through this, right? Takamatsu Sensei, right? Everybody reveres him. Oh, the clouds opened and the beams of light came through, and you know, he was materialized as a living warrior. And bullshit. His name was Crybaby when he was in school. He was so freaking bullied that the kids would knock him down on the ground and then ride him around the damn schoolyard like a freaking dog or a horse. Right? His dad was so frustrated trying to get things handled and fixed and toughen this kid up or whatever, and it just nothing was working, and he was freaking lamenting to his own dad, right? And grandpa says, send him to the dojo, I'll fix it. And for the first year, he did nothing but throw this freaking kid around, crying the whole time, right? Throwing him around, tripping him, throwing him, whatnot. So Takamatsu had to learn break falls, had to learn to roll, had to learn to not break. That was the whole first year, right? How many of you would have stuck with the training if you were flat out just told, you can't quit, you're not going anywhere, you will show up here every day after school, you will put on this uniform, and here's what the hell's going to happen. Until you can't not get broken, we're not doing anything else. Until you stop crying like a little damn baby and you handle a problem that's been given to you instead of whining about it, right? Nobody ever said you had to like it, but how many of us would have stuck with it? Right? Because after a while, that's not freaking entertaining. As a matter of fact, probably day one, it wasn't entertaining, right? But the first goal was to end up being in a state where you're not breakable. The physical body capable of enduring physical challenges. Mentally, nobody gives a shit whether you want to or not. You will do this and you will be successful, or you will break in the process. And he ended up becoming mentally resilient. He ended up becoming the 33rd Grandmaster of the Togakure school and all these other, this guy that everybody's like, oh, right? He wasn't born that way. Stop thinking that we were all born this way. Anyway, right? So I've been asked recently about, I have a little note here, right? So this is what I was taught. And most people are terrified to do anything differently, right? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. But anyway, there were these rank areas, right? These what we were tested on. Things just changed along the way to where rank became like this honorary thing, or people got promoted because they had a good heart, or you've been around for so many years, so therefore you should have the same skill set as everybody else who's been training the same level. That's what I was told, right? I jumped from 5th degree to 8th degree, not because somebody tested me while I was in Japan, but because I had been around for this number of years and I should have the same rank as everybody else. Well, that's bullshit. Okay. Now, looking around at the skill sets, our curriculum is what it is because of that. Anyway, so I should probably take a drink. I keep picking up this freaking can. Okay. So I was always tested through standards, right? There's a curriculum, there's standards to meet, there's certain things, and they all built upon each other, right? It wasn't just, here's the stuff we'd like you to know. But it's not what most people think, right? What most people tend to think is, okay, so you were tested on like Ichimonji kata, you were teaching to, whatever. And they were. I mean, we had a curricula of physical techniques, of physical skills, rolling, leaping, break falls, shuriken throwing, weapons were in there, certain types of meditation, breathing. So there were skill sets, right? And we had to demonstrate proficiency before we could go on to the next set, because the next set depended on the fact that we knew this stuff, right? So that Shuhari model, but I didn't know about the Shuhari model until I was well into the black belt levels, because we didn't use that terminology. But the way it was laid out, right? When everybody looks at the stuff that my original teacher did, and they're, oh, it's not the way they do it in Japan. Just because we didn't use the same words or do it exactly the same way doesn't mean that the same fucking process wasn't happening, right? But anyway, right, on the testing, with these testing forms, right, we're making some changes to the dojo and all that kind of stuff as well, and bringing back some things that we used to do before I tried to run everything through a pandemic, and even before that. But we have these rank request forms, right? It didn't matter if somebody came up for testing because it was scheduled or whatever. They completed this stuff. That way, when they passed, we already had the information to submit for the rank, or we knew what was to go on the rank certificate. And the bigger our school gets, the harder it's going to be for any person that's sitting down at the admin desk to, right now we have 51 students. But that grew really, really fast. So a lot of my guys, the shidoshi that are teaching, my admin assistant at the front desk, people are having a hard time freaking, keeping names straight, because we went from 10 or 12 coming out of the pandemic, right? And then really kicking things into high gear mid-November. So just before Christmas, right? And then by the end of January, beginning of February, we go from 10 to 12 to 51, right? There's a whole bunch of names that they have to catch up with, right? You imagine what's going to happen when there's 250 students running around one school. Okay. I know. Yeah. You're going to turn it into a McDojo. Until you're in the process and you know what we're doing, if that makes you feel all warm and fuzzy and better about yourself, then by all means, right? Anyway, but that's not what I'm talking about, right? On the testing form, there was this little reminder, right, that there's 3 areas that you're being reviewed for. And like the test where you were demonstrating your physical skills, that was one part of it. But leading up to that, your teachers were always paying attention to certain things. Like during test, I mean, we have test nights, right? But you can look at physical skills. You can ask questions about certain academic things. Here's this term in Japanese. What is the English translation for that term, right? That kind of stuff, right? That's all part of academic things, right? So, but there were these 3 aspects, okay? And it didn't say Mi wo shinobu, Shiki wo shinobu, Kokoro wo shinobu, right? That's just, that we didn't use that kind of terminology. That's in the back of the Nijutsu History and Tradition book, the first book that Hatsumi Sensei had written that came out in English, right? That's where that is, right? and a lot of people that like to argue with me, right, obviously can't read or don't read or just like to guess their way through things. And I don't have discussions with people like that any more than I have a discussion with a 6-year-old about maybe I should do something to the engine of my car, but they don't understand how the engine, how anything works, right? So I don't have discussions with people like that, right? But anyway, right? So these 3 areas, right? And it very clearly spelled it out. You're being tested on your ability with your physical skills and techniques. You're being assessed or tested on on an intellectual level, right? Your understanding of things like, let's say, I wrote a bunch of this stuff down, right? So your understanding about the art, right? The principles that you're working on within that given skill area, an understanding about the history, right, of the art. You have no idea how many times, like I take groups to Japan, and yes, we train at the dojo and all that, but we'll take these day trips and we'll go to Togakushi. It used to be called Togakure, now it's Togakushi Mountain, where the Togakure Ryu came from, right? Or we'll go to Kyoto to this or that temple or whatever that's connected historically to what we do, right? And every once in a while, right? People, what I found was we just had this reputation that, like, we just like ran around and did sightseeing instead of going to training. No, it was all training. Okay. But every once in a while, somebody will have the balls to actually like ask, right? Why do you go there? And after I give them this look, like, because my students need to understand the history and the connection, and if I put boots on the ground, right, then they start to get not just a better understanding or a knowledge of the history and where that is in the country and stuff like that, but a deeper connection and bond to the actual art itself and the people and what, how this came about. But I'll lay this stuff out, and I'll mention certain parts in certain books that Hatsumi Sensei wrote or whatever, right? And I'm like, so we go and we look at this, right? I remember one guy one time, he asked me about this, and he said, so what's so great there, right? I mean, I think I heard somewhere that Hatsumi Sensei like put a museum there, but I mean, what's the big deal, right? And so I laid it out, right? That like all this stuff that you see pictures of and all that Hatsumi Sensei got from Takamatsu, all this primitive stuff, right, ended up in this museum on Togakushi, right? So it's all there, but there's this ninja house that kind of gives you an idea of how the trap doors and some of this stuff works and all that, right? But a bunch of this old stuff, right? And there's a warrior cemetery along the path between one point and another that we go to, and about the history of this thing and how it was significant and all that, right? And I just spell it out a little bit and point to a couple of reference points in Hatsumi Sensei's books or videos or whatever, and they'll just look at me and go, wow, I never knew that was not my fault, brother. But if you don't go after this, then it definitely is you, right? So, but anyway, right? So there was this understanding of the history of the art, the strategies that are being transmitted through that model, that example, right? For a lot of people, that sacrosanct, that holier than thou model, right? That kata. No, it's an example, right? What is being tested on was the why, right? Could I explain the why, right? Did I understand it, right? And then this third area, which was quite surprising, but it's probably the most significant thing for me and how this stuff separated out. And people will say that my first teacher made all this stuff up, right? That's not historical, right? You have to ask when the person who's saying it jumped into the training, because people believe that it is the way it is and always has been based on how they encountered it, right? But if you read some of the early books by Hatsumi Sensei, by Stephen Hayes or whatever, that described classes in Japan before this big freaking ninja boom, and how Hayes trained or Doron Navon trained or whatever, and these lessons and kind of things that were going on in class happened, it's very different from what most people have experienced, right? But this third area that we were being assessed on was life improvement. So let that sink in for a minute. Life improvement, right? Because our life was a reflection of the lessons and the way we were applying those lessons in our lives. Well, does that mean that we were getting into fights? And, Sensei, you were a cop and stuff. So, you got a chance to use that stuff. What about the rest of us? Right? Well, here's the thing. This is happening anyway, right? Your life is a reflection of how the art's being applied. If I don't know anything more than the physical techniques and I'm not being physically attacked, well, how do I apply it? If I'm getting intellectual, academic, life lessons and all that and not applying them, well, shit. Well, there's going to be no change, right? The change is, and the reflection is going to be to the degree, not just whether or not we're applying it, but to the degree that we're applying it, right? So that was being looked at as well, right? I can truly say that there was a level of discomfort when I first got involved with the group, and I, grew through that and all that, and then the group change and whatnot. But I always gravitated toward the inner circles and the groups that made me feel, one, uncomfortable, like I was like the outsider, thankful that they let me in, but I better freaking step it up to belong in that group, right? The cool thing is we always had this growth kind of thing going on. So there was always something you could get involved in voluntarily, right? But there was a selection process voluntarily to get involved in. Any of my local students recognize the model, right? We're still doing it, right? Okay. So, but you should feel uncomfortable, right? Otherwise you're not growing, right? So, but anyway, our lives are a reflection of how we're applying the lessons. If we don't know them, well, then no reflection, right? If we do know them, but we're not applying them, still going to be obvious, right? What we think we know, or here's one better, what we're focusing on is going to be reflected back, okay? By accident or by intentional application of the principles and concepts, okay? I'll give you a physical example, but I want you to take a moment and look around. If you're online, if you've been jumping through any of these forums or whatever, right? There's a bunch of freaking drama shit just floating around all over the place, right? And it's funny how people think they're not a part of it, but they're mentioning it. But those of us who are following it but not participating, just so we can be clear about what kind of shit's going on, right? What's funny is people will take the high route, like this other person's doing it, but they're involved in the process. They're just pretending that they're not, right? But if you look around, I don't care if it's the martial arts world. I don't care if it's within Ninjutsu. I don't care if it's within the Bujinkan. I don't care whether it's within the three Kans, right? Bujinkan, Gemukan, Jininkan, right? There used to be a lot of infighting. Now there's more silence about it or whatever. But if you look around, what you're going to see is bullshit. People threatening to fight each other or challenging each other to fights or whatever. To me, that's people that are focused on fight skills, right? But this is what happens when we're only focusing on one or two of those three areas, right? And this can happen in a bunch of different combinations, but just for instance, right? If we're focusing on one and or two, right? So the physical and the intellectual, right? If it's all physical, we know what that's going to look like. Physical and intellectual, then people start talking about they're quoting historical facts and all that so they can be the top dog, right? But what you have, one way or the other, you have fighting, right? You either have all out like challenging to fight so we can see who's the top dog and all that, right? Or you got this argumentative bullshit fighting, right? But the opposite happens too. If our primary focus is on number two and number three, right? The intellectual and the life stuff, right? The wisdom, enlightenment teachings, those kind of things, right? Then what we end up with is this blissful thinking, but no bite to the technique, right? So, we got high rank and we talk a good blissful show and this and that, spirituality and all that, right? Um, but we're not willing to pressure test our techniques, right? And both sides knock the other one, right? So the blissful thinking side, right? The spiritual side, right? We don't have a need for any of that other, that tough guy kind of stuff or whatever. The tough guys are knocking the other ones like, yeah, but you don't pressure test anything, so I'll kick any of your ass. Just all kinds of bullshit, right? Just in that little microcosm, it's a reflection of how they're applying things in their lives, right? Here's another way to look at it, okay? We take any skill, any technique, right? And run it through the same process, okay? How do I get something like Ichimonji no Kata to reflect in my life as the way I'm producing results, unless somebody's punching me in the face, unless somebody's trying to stab me, right? There's this disconnect because, again, people are taking this big friggin' monstrosity of a system and bringing it down to something that's easily controlled, easily learned, easily quote unquote mastered, as I've been told, right? But it's just this little thing. And then you live in a peaceful neighborhood and society. And then what? Well, you get to talk a good show and you get to BS people all the time, but nobody's attacking you. Or you live like some of the guys that I know in the art. You live in certain areas and you won't move out of them because that's where we've always lived, right? That's where my people live and all that, right? And so I have a need for these survival skills, so I've got to be the top dog on the street. See, life choices, conditioned, accidental, intentional, whatever, right? Your life is a reflection of how you're applying the lessons, right? So let's use Ichimonji no Kata. Let's do that, shall we? Okay. So physical prowess, physical proficiency, right? Skill proficiency. That's easy. Teach me this thing, right? I start out in this Gyokoryu Kamae, right? It's Ichimonji no Kata. He throws a punch. I shift, do squatting counter strike to this incoming pressure point or receiving arm, whichever one you're doing with your model, right? And then I shift in while controlling the punching arm so it doesn't get away from me, and I break his balance, come in with this omote shito to the side of his neck, drive him into the ground, back off, right? Fantastic. Wonderful. Okay. Yay, right? Just like applauding for somebody who did a great ballet dance in an opera or whatever, right? Okay. But what about the intellectual side of that, right? What is it? What is Ichimonji no Kata? What are we doing, right? What is it? Where's the strategy, the tactics? What's going on, right? Okay. Well, if I can understand, if I can learn from that form that what I'm doing is I'm neutralizing the force of his attack as he's coming in, I'm catching him, and I'm moving in such a way that allows me to move in on him, breaking his balance at the same time, right? Neutralizing whatever he's doing, right? Finding an opening and moving in a way that I can access that where he can't stop me, he can't resist or whatever. And if he tries, it backfires on him even more. Okay? And there's a lot more to Ichimonji no Kata, right? As a Kihon, it's teaching you how to strike while stepping, where Jumonji no Kata is teaching you to strike without stepping. All kinds of things, right? But here's this thing, right? I'm neutralizing what he's throwing at me, finding an opening, and then entering in a way that he can't do anything about it, right? So that I can deliver my counter, right? And if he does try, right, to resist, to escape, to whatever, it just backfires on him and it gets even worse for him, right? So that's the gist, okay? What the hell does that look like in life, Sensei? It can show up in lots of different ways, but let's just pick one, okay? Somebody's arguing with me. Somebody's yelling and screaming and all kinds of stuff and calling me names and pointing out all these flaws about me and all that kind of stuff, right? So what can I do? I can mentally take up a position that's good for observation, right? I'm not going to respond to anything. I'm going to pay attention, right? Just like in Kamae, all the time they're moving around and getting set before they start slinging things, right? And maybe even if they do, right, I'll just move and stay away from these things as they're coming in, right? But I'm observing, I'm watching their attacks, I'm paying attention to what they're doing, right? That kind of thing. I'm moving my targets so they can't hurt me, that kind of thing, right? So what I'm doing mentally is listening, right? Observing, right? Listening, right? Not responding. I'm not going to react. I'm not just going to flail. I'm not just going to, they're yelling at me, calling me names. So I'm going to yell at them and call them. No. I'm going to pay attention to what they're doing. I'm going to listen to what they're using, right? Things that are true, right? I'm going to set off to the side for the moment because they don't matter at the moment, right? I'll work on that myself. If it's true, then I'll take responsibility for it and I'll fix it. That's not the issue at the moment, right? What I'm listening for are lies, embellishments, right? Bluffs, all kinds of things that are not true. See, now they're giving me targets. Okay. And when they take a breath, or when I'm ready and I go, no, my turn to talk. And I start only pinging on the things that they were wrong about, they lied about, they embellished about, or whatever, right? That's what I'm going to target. Okay. Because any attempt on their part to fix that, just digs a deeper hole. They lied. You can't fix that. Right. So that's why I'm not going to sling back about things that are true. Right. That's the punch coming at me. Right. That's the kick. That's the knife. That's the stab. Right. I'm going to just mentally avoid those. Right. Just kind of put them off to the side. And what I'm paying attention to are the openings, and the openings are lies, embellishments. They're making shit up, whatever. Right. And then when it's my turn, I'm going to target the weaknesses. I'm going to target the things that if they try to resist or whatever, they try to sling back, they're just going to dig holes deeper. It's just going to backfire on them and make it worse on them. Right. I'm going to leave the things that are true alone, just like I would leave punches and knives and all that stuff. I'm getting out of the way. Right. That's for another day. That's for me to go work on me if it's true. Right. But what most people do is fight like freaking cavemen, whether it's fisticuffs or whether it's, they're yelling at me and I'm yelling at them, and they'll say anything to win the fight or, make me feel bad and crushed and all that. And I'll do the same thing to them. And then afterwards, we're going to apologize and go, I'm sorry, baby, I really didn't mean it. Really? You meant to win the damn fight. You won. Don't apologize. Right? If you meant to burn bridges, don't apologize. If you're apologizing to keep somebody in your life because you're afraid to be alone, see, that's a whole different problem area. Right? But do you get where I'm going with this? Right? So Ichimonji no Kata has a physical form. Ichimonji no Kata has a strategic, tactical, intellectual reason, logic that's being used. Right? And then it can show up in many different ways in your life, whether I'm dealing with a pressure salesman, or like I said, the argument or whatever, right? How, right? I have to know its essential nature. And then what would that look like in different challenges, in different kind of situations, right? So that's what we mean by applying the principles and concepts in our everyday lives. Okay. All right. So what else do I have? I think just a couple more things to wrap it up, and then we'll open it up to questions. I'm sure James is keeping track of that stuff. So, like I said, did I skip over some things here? Okay. So, like I said, this is what happens when only one or two of those three areas are focused on, right? Again, we're only focusing on 1 and 2, right? Physical, mental. You get fighting of some sort, right? Because everybody's trying to vie for being top dog, but all they're focusing on are fight techniques, fight skills, whatever, right? How to be the winner, how to be, okay? So that creates a certain mentality. That creates a certain type of activity, right? And that gets reflected in your life, right? Everything's a goddamn contest, right? Everything's a challenge, everything, and not like challenges, like I'm striving to get to that goal. And I've got some challenges, right? Coordination, understanding, the ability to get time off work so I could show up for certain trainings, whatever. Those are challenges to get there, right? I'm not talking about anybody that appears to be close to or getting better than you or whatever, and now you got to knock them down and put them in their place. And so if that's the problem, then life is going to be fucking way more difficult than it needs to be, right? Or if we're only focusing on 2 or 3 and we want to be that blissful, enlightened warrior kind of thing, right? So it's all about soft training and it's all about, really, what is it all about? Really? Don't ever forget the word martial, right? It means of and about warfare, okay? Overcoming challenges, overcoming threats, those kind of things, right? But there needs to be a balance, both sides. But it's not about both sides learning from the other. It's about every individual paying attention to these 3 areas of personal development, right? So one of my teachers, Shoshi Malmstrom, he used to say, there's this big dog, little dog syndrome kind of thing, right? If you're not willing, what do you say? If you can't play with the big dogs, don't get off the porch, right? And what that means is if you can't get out there and do challenging things and be willing to pressure test things, but this is in both realms, not just, physical challenges and attacks and things like that, right? But what about your own interpersonal demons, right? I need to do steps 3, 4, and 5 in this 10-step process to realize that goal, to take that cruise, to take that vacation, to get that degree I need, to whatever it is, right? I need to do those, but they terrify me. I can't pick up the phone and call that person that I need to talk to. Will you do it for me? No. At some point, everybody needs to tell you no, so you have to do it yourself. Okay. And what you find is that the more you do it, the better you get because your skill set gets better. And you realize it's just another human being on the other end of the line. And if you get your shit together, right, you figure out that either they don't like their job, so you learn how to communicate, right? So you learn how to get somebody to see the reasons for using Ninja no Uke, right? Instead of just being terrified, right? One of the things that's always been funny for me is when we have a team, part of our team training and all that, I tell all my instructor candidates, right? No one's ever an instructor unless they have students, which sounds like a duh, but the number of people that have introduced themselves to me and told me that they were a martial arts instructor, but they didn't have a school at the moment and they didn't have any students, you're not a damn instructor. You might be a high-level black belt or a skilled person or whatever, but you need students to be a teacher. You need students to be an instructor, right? It's like I knew someone once that had a church, okay? Had a church. I'm a church. We got this church, 300 seats, 300 people and all that. Took him to Japan one time, and, he had introduced himself to a couple of my peers, other Daishian and stuff. And then they said, oh, yeah, I met this guy. He's really nice. Told me that, he's got this 300 person congregation and all that. And I went, wait, what? No. He has a church. He bought a church and he refurbished it and all that. And it has a 300 seat capacity, but he doesn't have a congregation. So is he really a minister? I know he might have a document and all that kind of stuff. I'm not going to split hairs or whatever, but without a congregation, who the hell are you ministering to? Anyway, it is what it is, right? So, but, big dog, little dog kind of thing, right? You got the one that's yapping, looks scary, right? But if you take a step in their direction, they'll run behind the couch and bark from there. Big dog just lays around on the carpet, kids climbing all over him, all kinds of stuff, right? You bump him with your foot to, get his attention and stuff, right? He knows he can gnaw your freaking leg off. He just wants to live a nice life. And if you push it too far, he'll growl a little bit, remind you, hey, just in case you forgot, I'll bite your damn testicles off, right? But he just wants to live a nice life. But he's got that power. But it's the ones with the power that have the ability to lay around and enjoy life and be comfortable and all that, right? It's the ones yelling around and barking and all that. Not that they're not dangerous. They can be highly dangerous, right? Because they're trying to prove a point more to themselves than to anybody else, right? They say it's about everybody else, but it's about them, right? They need to feel powerful. People that are powerful don't need to feel powerful. They don't need to remind you that they can kick your ass or that they can strip you of your job or whatever, right? So here's what I want to leave you with this episode, right? Well, I'll take some questions if any pop up or whatever. But my students are held to this stuff, whether they know it or not. And you can usually tell whether or not I think you're doing well, because if you're in my classes, I'll either mention it or not. If I see that you're working on things, I tend to not mention it a whole lot. I might drop a little clue or a cue here every once in a while, or mention he's working on this or whatever, right? And I'll look over at that student and go, not easy all the time, is it? Right? But those who aren't, right, they probably get tired of hearing me teach the same stuff about visions and plans and those kind of things that are life related and not what they think is martial arts related, right? But if they were actually working on it, I wouldn't mention it very much, because they only need guidance every once in a while. They don't need to be reminded constantly, right? So I know a lot of people are going to go, well, my teacher doesn't mention it at all, so I must really be cooking. Maybe your teacher's not focused on it at all. How about that? Okay. And that also begets why people would be gravitated to learning from teachers that they haven't gained the kind of level of success that you aspire to, right? I have always sought out the best in whatever area, right? And at certain times that kind of thing changed, because I realized I needed something different, and you're not cutting it, or you're showing me aspects of how you live life. No. I don't want to be like that. So I'm going to realign to this teacher, right? Remember, Ninja did that historically. Okay. So, but what I would suggest is you take these things to heart. Of course, I'm going to suggest it, because ultimately it's up to you, right? But why would you not want to expand out from just the physical and get the logic behind it, the strategy, learn more about the art and the history and all that kind of stuff, so you can understand why it was developed and how it would be applied, and then look for modern equivalents, right? Why? What Hatsumi Sensei say? Now is the time for ninjutsu to shine again because of the world's conditions and things like that, right? How does that different than us just freaking taking sides and bullying the other side because it's a different ideology, right? What is it that he's talking about, right? And then figuring out based on the logic, right? What is this technique teaching? What is it teaching about how to control a bubble, right? Now, how can I apply that in arguments against pushy salesmen, whatever, right? Whatever challenges pop up, which technique that I've learned, I know I learned it against a punch and a kick, and I'm parrying, then I'm moving, right? But which one, right? Will handle this situation? No punches are flying. Maybe no words are flying. Maybe it's internal, right? My own demons, right? But how do I handle that? What have I learned? Take a deep breath, back up, observe, or pull the damn trigger, go, right? Get in there, get it done. I don't like doing it. Well, that's all the more reason to get it done quickly. Get past it. Get onto the stuff that you do enjoy doing. Most people hold off the hard stuff for last. It's just procrastination. I do the hard stuff first, so I will spend more time doing the enjoyable stuff, right? But that's me. All right. I'm going to unlock. I'm going to get James out of his cage here. See if we got anything else. James.
Hello, sir.
Because he came into the dojo and got something started that we used to have. We used to have these Senbon Shuriken decals on the floor so people could stand. It's a place to stand. I mean, some people are going to look at it and go, "Oh, you're that freaking regimented." When we're doing certain things, yeah, we want to get class started right away and have people in certain positions. So he laid these things out, and people came to class, and they were like I don't know, monkeys in a zoo that I tossed a key fob to, right? And they're like, "Oh, what is that for?" And what? Some were like, Is that tape on the floor or is that real? Is that? I just said I can't wait till one of you monkeys try to pick one of those tape Senbon up after we've done shuriken evasion, and you're so. All right. Any questions or any comments or whatever come in while I was doing that long diatribe there, James?
No questions. Just some people when they jumped on saying hi. Like Shane's here, Jen's here.
Awesome. Hey,
Julio.
Julio
Julia.
Rodriguez. Who? Oh, Julia. I'm sorry. I had the student for the longest time. He was like super into it, and then life crap just got in the way. And then, that's usually how I end up losing people, and then they get sidetracked and whatever, or they left the school and then they're afraid that I'm going to be pissed at them for the rest of their lives and I will never let them back. I can count on one hand how many people I've kicked out of my dojo, and I will never let back, because unless they can prove that they're a completely different person, they are quite damaging. So, but that's that. So nothing. Wow. Either I was that freaking boring. Yeah. The numbers really went up there for a while that people were on, but not their cup of tea. Maybe Whiteboard Wednesday will be better. So I'm talking about pressure points and all that stuff. So, all right. Well, cool. Did you have anything to throw on top of this fire? James is a new Shodan, just in case you didn't know that. Yay, James. Went out and got himself a haircut. Combed his hair, actually. I don't know what he did. Sensei's an ass. I know. James is an ass. Right. Anyway. All right. Cool. So nothing.
Nope. Nothing came in.
All right. A couple of dates to throw at it, folks, if I can remember these things correctly off the top of my head. Spring camp. That's April, right? No. Wait. Oh, shit. That's May. 13th, 14th, and shit, I thought I had it. Hold on a second.
May 13th through the 15th.
There you go. 13th to the 15th. Thanks. May. I thought I had it. Right. Fall camp is September 30th, October 1st, and 2nd. Right. So I know it sounds like 3 full days, but Friday nights are an 8 to 10. I know it's a late training. Can't I just come in for Saturday morning? Yeah, but we do some really cool shit for the few people that come in for Friday night. So hint, hint, nudge, nudge. You might want to try to get some extra training in, right? But anyway, it's a late thing, and then because some people can make it, some people can't. I'm poking fun, and I'm just trying to see who I can irritate, because that's what I do. And then full days on Saturday, Sunday, and good thing. And then Daikomyosai for 23 is January 6th, 7th, and 8th. Is that right? 6th, 7th, and 8th. Same thing, right? Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. The only difference between those is Daikomyosai for the new year. We do a New Year's Goma active meditation from our Mikyo. That's for goal setting, to really, I call it goal setting on steroids. We literally, well, not literally, I guess metaphorically, burn it into your psyche, so that because fire's involved, right? Oh shit, fire! Right? Yes, that's all good, and we have a bunch of things that are going on that I'm going to be adding to the schedule here. But the big thing that I had to get on very quickly here is the first Saturday in March. Is that the 5th, March 5th? A 10-week instructor training program kicks off, and this is where it's going to be boring for a lot of people. Maybe not. James, I don't know. Was it boring the first time around?
No.
It was unsettling, right? And while people are doing martial arts techniques, I'm not running a 10-week course so I can teach you how to do the techniques that you'll be teaching other people. I would never let anybody teach a class they don't already know the friggin' techniques for, right? So, but what I'm covering during those 10 weeks is the psychology of being a professional martial arts educator, right? How to teach to and communicate with the 4 different learning types, how to structure a class, how to use certain like neurolinguistic techniques and whatnot that help a student get over and around their own self-imposed limitations, fears, concerns, whatever, those condition traps and those kind of things like that. So we'll do things like locator questions and pre-framing and reframing and those kind of things to help a student learn quickly, right? By getting over their own little thing. But there's a lot in there about leadership, because your class is a reflection of the leader, of the instructor. The reality is that in every class that you teach, and this is not just for people that want to be an instructor now, you might be a white belt, you might be a yellow belt, green belt, right? You might want to learn how to use some of these techniques and tactics to help teach your kids important lessons. Or you might be a manager at work and you need to convey things. This stuff crosses lines. It's not just about martial arts, right? Where was I going to go with that original thing? What did I say before I threw that little detour in there, James? It's not just for, like I said, it's not just for somebody who's doing it now or whatever, right? You might be an aspiring teacher. You might think about doing that down the line, right? But what we're going to have, obviously we'll be doing training at the dojo, but we will have a virtual option for this. Okay. So those of you who are running your own training groups, or those of you who are at the school, you will have active internship kind of exercises that you have to do, whether it's teaching something or whatever, so you can practice, using these skills. But there's a lot of leadership in there as well. That's what I was going to say. Right. One of the first things that instructor candidates will learn, I'm kind of giving you a heads up on this, is that every instructor needs to remember that every class that they teach, their students are either one step closer to black belt, or one step closer to the next belt or the next black belt or whatever, or one step closer to the door. Okay. Instructors need to stop blaming student attrition on bad students, on non-committed students, right? Students who see value, students who are seeing progress and that kind of thing. And I don't mean fake stuff like I'm giving them belts and whatever, right? But they see value, and they're getting higher level lessons, right? You will have students for life, right? Students that we tend to have drop off, except when this damn pandemic happened and you realized just how many people were doing it as an activity because we went virtual and they couldn't even come to class, but they didn't even have to leave their house, right? So that was pretty interesting. But anyway, so it's this mindset, this leadership mindset, managing a class, thinking about things from the context of client fulfillment, right? When somebody signs up for your classes or they jump into your group or whatever, right? You've made a promise, whether you explicitly stated it or not. There's a promise of value. There's a promise of skill set, progress, that they're going to be getting what it was that they came to you for. And that might not be how to learn how to do Ichimonji no Kata. It might be improved confidence. It might be improved sense of discipline or anger management or whatever, right? And whether or not they're around or not is dependent upon how you focus. And it doesn't have to be like 100%, right? It could be 5% of a class, but I'm hitting on something every class that student absolutely wants to get out of the training, right? And James knows. I mean, we had that meeting last Thursday to open it up for instructors or instructor candidates, right? We had people tripping over themselves to jump on that, right? I mean, it was a huge turnout, right? So now they have to go through an application process to see to make sure that they're going to be okay. But either way, right? So that'll be virtual as well. So that's there's a full day at the front end. There's a half day at the back end. That's a Saturday because there's a lot to pack into that initial thing. And then it's every Wednesday, right? Every Wednesday evening. Is that 6?
6 or 7,
something like that, right? For I think a total of 10 weeks. Right. Although there's 2 classes on that tail end week. Wednesday we have a class, and then Saturday is a review and test. Right. So cool stuff. So if you're interested, shoot us an email. warriorc at warrior-concepts-online.com. Please spell warrior correctly, right? You can always Google it. Anyway, anything else, James? Anything else pop in while I was?
Looks like Daryl's on. He just said thank you, very informative.
Oh, cool. Awesome.
Other than that, no.
Okay, all right. Well, anything else you want to throw in the fire?
Nope, I'm good.
He's my opposite, right? I talk all the time. You'd think I talk all the time. When I'm done, my wife can't freaking pry words out of my mouth, right? It doesn't matter. If I had him do a speech, he'd probably get up, smile at everybody, and go, "Thanks for coming." That's it. I'm done. Tell me I'm wrong, unless I forced you to do something different, which I will. Anyway, all right, guys, I'm going to wrap this up. Next Monday, we'll be back on again. And don't forget, this Wednesday coming up, the 23rd at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. And I'm covering the problem with the way people think of this idea of Q-show, right? How it's wrongly defined, right? It's the bad translation, right? So it really limits people's training. And we're going to look at 4 different types of so-called pressure points, right? How they work, how they activate. And then, of course, that's the big overview lesson. It's a full lesson in of itself. The Whiteboard Wednesdays are a full lesson, but they're a big strategic kind of thing. But then Friday's masterclass at the dojo, will be a virtual kind of thing that people can jump into. So we're going to be looking at pressure points. So James is probably glad that he only comes in on Tuesdays and Saturdays because people are probably going to get pretty torn up on Friday. Sensei's an ass. No, Sensei's just effective.
Yes.
All right. That's it. All right. Or don't trust me. I mean, I'm just the old fat bald guy. So whatever, don't listen to that guy. But I do have a 6-pack ab under my my fluffy exterior. All right. Before I run it, I'm going to be done. Right. So anyway, that's it. Thanks everybody for showing up. If you're listening in on the recording and you have any other questions or topic ideas or whatever, same thing. warriorc at warrior-concepts-online.com, warrior-concepts-online.com, or you can go onto the KUDEN podcast page on Facebook, right? And in comments, just ask a question or submit things. Right? I'll make James answer the stuff. No, we try to get to him as much as possible, but James knows how much freaking spam and like, can Ninja really jump up like to a 3-story building from the ground like they show in the movies? Right? We love getting those, don't we? Or somebody that signs up for something, right? Gets information, all that, and then doesn't do anything for a while, gets an email from me, right? And then we get this flaming freaking, fuck you, right? How dare you spam me and send me stuff? And I just chuckle and send him a message and go, can you find this wingnut on whatever lists he signed up for and freaking boot his ass off of things, right? What's that? Yeah, like I spam people, right? I don't send anything to anybody you didn't sign up for. So, right? Anyway, and besides that, there's an unsubscribe freaking button all the way down at the bottom of every single email, right? You see what I've been adding. There's a PS at the bottom of a bunch of my emails.
Yeah.
Right? Don't be like one of these freaking wussies, right? Because I don't have time for your shit, right? If you can't scroll, send one of these freaking emails. That'd be great. After I finish chuckling and I send it off to James, James will just find your name and you'll be done, right? But how about if you just be a freaking responsible person and scroll to the bottom of the damn thing? Anytime you think you're being spammed by anybody, right? The canned spam laws require that this thing is on the email, right? If you signed up for it and you decide you didn't want to get it, it's not suddenly spam because you don't want it, right? What makes it spam is you didn't sign up for it, and or there isn't an unsubscribe link somewhere on the damn page. So if you scroll down to any of our emails, there's an unsubscribe link. It took some of these people, it took them more time to express themselves, right, than to scroll down and click a damn link, right?
Absolutely.
I had more important things to do with my life than to go through all these emails that I didn't do, and they're obviously spam, right? What do I have you do? A couple of times a week, go through and go click, 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 delete, right? I don't even have to look at them. They do get in the way of everybody else that's sending in things too. So sometimes we do miss things because of the freaking volume of just out and out bullshit that we get, right? But either way. All right, so hopefully I'll see some of you on Wednesday, and hopefully I'll see some of you in May for spring camp. And if not, well, make sure your ass is training. That's all I got, right? And remember, life's your litmus test, okay? And stop living by the adage that absence of evidence is somehow like a forever thing, right? Absence of evidence does not prove, it is not the evidence of absence, right? It's not, it doesn't work that way, right? All you have to do is, you don't have to look in your own little bubble. If you look outside your little bubble, and if there's plenty of proof that other people have become successful using the same principles, then, and overcoming the same hardships, then you need to stop saying, yeah, but, you don't understand. I'm different, right? One of the hard lessons I got is the more unique you think you are and the more unique you think your situation is, the more average you actually are, because everybody thinks their situation is unique. And it's just not. Okay? You want to be unique? Do the hard shit nobody else will do, and you'll get the benefits and rewards that nobody else is getting. You want to set yourself apart? Do the shit nobody else will do. That'll make a change. Huge change. Right? That's it. I'm done. Put that back over on that. Where the hell's the main page? Where is it? Can you switch it back? See, now what did you do? Let's see what happens if I just hit this to end it.
Get more of KUDEN Radio. Subscribe through your favorite podcasting site or subscribe at modernninjawarrior.com.